speakers, dear colleagues and participants following us online or joining us here in person today. And welcome to our session, Localizing the NDCs, How Do We Fund and Implement Action at Scale? So my name is Giorgia Rambelli. I'm the coordinator for the Global Covenants of Mayor Global Regional Coherence work, and I am part of the Secretariat of the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy. And it will be my great pleasure to be the moderator for your discussion today. So today's session is organized by the Global Covenant of Mayors in cooperation with the European Covenant. The unprecedented scale of action needed to tackle the global climate challenges we are facing today and to deliver the necessary measure to decarbonize our society leave no questions. We need all hands on deck. Not only we need to raise ambition and commitment, but most of all, we need to accelerate action across sector, across level of government, and across all parts of our society. This is not only a challenge, but also it represents a great opportunity to drive forward transformation that will influence our society like never before. And this is true from an environmental, but also from an economic and in a social point of view. So local governments have a key play to role in supporting and even in leading the delivery of this transformation and in meeting successfully the objectives of the Paris Agreement at the speed and at the scale that is required. So they are not only administrators, but they can also boost action with their political commitment. They can lead by example. They are also not only service providers to the community they serve and they represent, but also catalyzers for action and drivers of innovation. And often they can act as test beds to pilot climate solutions on the ground, right where they are needed. So today, when some 113 countries plus the EU have submitted the new NDCs targets to the UNFCCC Secretariat, we want to discuss how national and local governments can and are already collaborating effectively. How can they create together concrete synergies? How can they foster alignment and integration of city-level climate action plans within the NDC multi-level implementation process? So in this session, we will explore how the full potential of cooperation across level of governments is tapped across the world under the shared target to reach climate neutrality. We will also touch upon the role that effective multi-level governance can play in unlocking finance for climate action. And we will hear the perspective of financial institutions in regards to this. After that, we will also hear a number of success stories and learn about the latest key outputs developed by the Global Covenant Secretariat and its partners, and the collaboration in particular around implementing nationally determined contribution together with local governments. We will also hear about a new country-tailored initiative to support multi-level climate action that will be launched by the Global Secretariat very soon. Finally, we will talk about, and we walk through a stocktake around the major impacts and the contribution to a climate neutral and resilient future that every day the Global Covenant of Mayor communities and cities are making through their own climate action. So to join me in this discussion and to answer all of these many questions, it's my pleasure to now introduce to you the panelists that will be joining me here at the pavilion in person. So it's a pleasure for me to have Mr. Masamba Choi, the UNFCCC Manager of Regulatory Framework Implementation Subdivision. I also am joined by Ryuzo Sugimoto. He's the Director of International Cooperation and Sustainable Infrastructure Office at the Global Environmental Bureau of the Ministry of Environment, Japan. It's also my pleasure to welcome here in person Sharon Dijksma. She is the mayor of the city of Utrecht. And we will have also a number of colleagues that will be joining us online. Thank you, Julia, for joining us online. And back here in person, Livius Stirbat is the Deputy Head of Unit of the European Commission Directorate General for Climate Action and Adaptation. Finally, a number of colleagues from the Global Covenant Secretariat would also be joining us and sharing their input to the discussion. And I will be joined by Benjamin Hanse and by Andy Deacon, is the Acting Managing Director of the Global Covenant Secretariat, as well as Pier Roberto Remiti, the team leader of the European Union Fund support team to the Global Covenant Secretariat. So a number of speakers, a number of input that we can expect to hear very soon. But to get us started with our conversation today, It's now my pleasure to give the floor virtually to the Lord Mayor of the city of Toyota, Toshihiko Ota. He will share with us his message on how Toyota, a Japanese city, is trying to become carbon neutral. So we will see a video message right now.
Aichi Prefecture is located roughly.
Ça, si je parle en anglais, c'est bon.
In Toyota, manufacturing industries such as sericulture and silk manufacturing industry have been active for generations. In the Showa period, the city attracted businesses of the automobile industry, which was a new sector at the time. Since then, Toyota has developed as a city with a vibrant automobile industry, including Toyota Motor Corporation. The technology and spirit of manufacturing have been passed along to the present day in the city. Toyota has many more attractions that we would like you to know about.
Ça parle en anglais. Ouh là là.
Quels sont de...
Excellencies, distinguished delegates and participants, good morning and good afternoon. I am Toshihiko Ota, Mayor of Toyota City. Toyota City has been well known as a town of manufacturing for a long time. However, as you can see in the video, it has beautiful and rich nature as well. That means Toyota City has two faces, the face of a city and the face of a mountain village. 70% of the city's total area is covered with forest, which is the same ratio as that of Japan's whole land. Therefore, we can call it a microcosm of Japan. Toyota City was selected as an eco-model city by the government in 2009, and we have been promoting a variety of initiatives to significantly reduce carbon dioxide emission. We jointly pledged Japanese Covenant of Mayors, introduced by Nagoya University, with 4 neighboring cities in December 2015, and then targeting 30% reduction by 2030. We participated in Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy in October 2018. In order to reduce carbon dioxide emission, we are focusing our efforts on 5 pillars, which are not only 3 of the city's strengths, transportation, industry, and forest, but also civilian sector, which transforms the civilians' lifestyle into low-carbon living and downtown to disseminate information on our initiatives. We have been leading so many initiatives, like the development of environmentally friendly public transport. Fostering next-generation industries in the industrial sector. A large amount of carbon dioxide absorption by appropriate forest management in the forest sector. Promoting the spread of smart houses and smart towns in the consumer sector. And furthermore, construction and managing the Toyota Eco-Fuel Town, which is a facility for dissemination information on carbon dioxide reduction efforts in the downtown area. In addition, as our major initiatives in the transportation and the civilian fields, we have been promoting low carbonization of entire living area by reduction of carbon dioxide emission and optimally controlling energy in the house, on the way, and at the destination. In other words, in all aspects of our daily lives. As a result of these our efforts, in fiscal.
Thank you very much to Toyota for their video message, and it's a pity that we couldn't have them here in person, but certainly they left us with a taste of the beauty of their city, of course, but also with the beauty of their ambition that they are trying to push forward together with many other GCOM cities all over the world in trying to reach climate neutrality. And to hear a little bit more about how we are trying to localize as much as possible the NDC and to implement and accelerate climate action on the ground, it's now my pleasure to give the floor to my colleague Ben, who will tell us a little bit about a brand new playbook that will provide tools by local, regional and national authorities to really implement together jointly this effort. So Ben, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Very kind introduction, and indeed a very exciting day for the Global Covenant and our 100 plus partners launching a very exciting product. But first, just before that product and going into this sort of next slide, part of the reason why we need to launch this product in the first place, there's quite a few challenges that need to be tackled on the ground when it comes to localizing NDCs. First, as the UNFCCC in its synthesis report earlier in September this year said, the NDCs are currently insufficient. They're likely to take up 89% of the global carbon budget between 2020 and 2030. So clearly there's a bit of a gap both in ambition and in implementation, where parties to the Paris Agreement need to aim higher and act faster, all at the same time. So it's a tall order. We also know that governance is complex, right? To capture, to measure, to monitor action and progress requires incredible amounts of resource and capacity, strategic at that. And then last but not least, data access can be quite challenging as well on mitigation, on adaptation, and on energy, especially for low and middle income countries. And so if we go to the next slide, we're also going to see then what we're looking at together with all of the GCOM partners and an expert group dedicated specifically to regional and local contributions, the ability of cities and local governments and regional governments as well to act as entry points for progress, where we're crafting opportunities for regional and local contributions, and those are capitalized for a reason, to nationally determined contributions submitted by the parties. And we capitalize RLC, as we call them RLCs, specifically because we're looking at those as the climate commitments, actions, and achievements of local and regional governments, again, across mitigation, adaptation, and energy access and poverty, whose value in bolstering NDCs is formally acknowledged by the UNFCCC and its parties. And they're designed specifically to be integrated into the development of each party's NDC in a process of complementarity with existing commitments, with the potential to strengthen their ambition and robustness. So keeping that in mind, right, why are we pushing RLCs as a key tool to leverage, to localize NDCs and make them stronger? Well, as the Global Covenant, we know that cities are planning and taking action as we speak. GCOM now counts more than 11,000 signatories, and I'll leave it to my colleague Andy Deegan later on to share a little bit more about where the Global Covenant stands today. We also know it's feasible to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from urban areas by 90% using existing and proven technologies. And last but not least, all of this produces a critical opportunity to address the climate crisis through stronger vertical integration that brings these local and regional climate contributions into party NDCs. And that's why today, if we go to the next slide, we're launching the Multi-Level Climate Action Playbook for local and regional governments. If we hop over to the next slide, what this is, it's a first edition all-in-one resource for local and regional governments. It also contains guidance for national governments, for GCOM Alliance partners, and practitioners by recommending key elements of an enabling environment that helps identify and weave the RLCs into party policy developments, helps facilitate credible climate commitments and actions that are, again, recognized, taken into account and integrated by the UNFCCC and parties, and helps accelerate vertical integration, that key piece that we so badly need to help localize NDCs and make them stronger as well across all of the countries. If we hop over to the next slide, this is a kind of the playing field that we're taking a look at, right? We know that the reporting cycles of the UNFCCC and of the parties with their NDCs, we know those as known quantities. They have to submit NDCs, they have to submit biannual update reports, right? And so what we're proposing is nothing, it's not reinventing the wheel, but instead we're looking to take advantage of the work that's already being done by cities, by local governments, by regional governments today, to make sure that that's integrated into each party's NDC strategic planning and technical working group process, right? So it's about integrating their contributions and making sure that their voices are heard, that they have a seat at the table, and that this process is led by national governments and parties, really bringing them in and making those NDCs and those commitments stronger. And complementary to that, of course, is annual aligned impact reporting that's facilitated by the GCOM Alliance. And again, my colleague Andy will show a little bit of a preview of what that could look like, what it does look like today, and what it could be going forward as well. For the next slide, we'll take a look very briefly at how the playbook is structured. It's a set of targeted recommendations to unlock integrated action and implementation. It's again led by national governments, accelerated by local and regional governments, the engine rooms, right, of innovation and of progress. And the pathways, there's 4 of them. They focus broadly on science and policy. They focus on partnering with national government to integrate RLCs, to committing strong and robust targets, to acting, measuring, and reporting. And we're also highlighting the capacity building and access to finance pieces facilitated by partners, parties, and others.
Thank you very much, Ben, for the presentation. I think it was already quite a good overview, and of course we don't want to spoil the opportunity for everyone to also have the opportunity to check out the playbook on their own. And this is a little bit of homework, of course, for everyone following us either on the line or here in person. And now I would like to maybe go to our panel then, taking stock of what Ben has just showed us, and these challenges that have been pinpointed, of course, but also looking into all this wealth of material that is already available, as you can see, to the point that we can actually draft recommendation and a playbook on what local, national governments are doing together to accelerate the implementation of the NDCs. And maybe I would like to go to you, Masamba, first, to ask a little bit what is your perspective around the importance of multi-level integrated action for effective implementation of the NDCs.
Thank you. Thank you. And good afternoon, everybody. I'm very pleased to be part of this panel, and I would like to thank the organizer, the European Commission, the Covenant of Mayor for Climate and Energy Europe.
Use a microphone. Yeah.
It's okay. Yeah. I would like to thank the European Commission, the Covenant of Mayor for Climate and Energy Europe, and the Global Covenant of Mayor for the invitation to share insight on the importance of multi-level integrated climate action and how it can actually foster effective implementation of NDC. So as it was mentioned by the moderator, the climate crisis requires action at all levels, at the country level, at the subnational level, be it at the state level, province level, city level, and also at the level of individual citizen. So this can be achieved through multilateral, multi-level and integrated type of climate action with co-creation, with a two-way dialogue that allow to develop evidence-based national policies that will inform and enable the implementation of local climate action, which in return will support the implementation, the successful implementation of the NDCs. So this two-way collaboration is extremely important, and you will see that during all during my intervention, this will be mentioned. So we think that the longer-term low-emission development strategy of countries could be the right platform that will allow this multi-level collaboration and this integration to take place. So the longer-term low-emission development strategy should obviously be aligned with the long-term goal of the Paris Agreement and the sustainability goal to be relevant, otherwise it is irrelevant. So it means that it will be very important to start from the longer-term goal of the Paris Agreement and the sustainability goal and use a backcasting normative scenario and translate them into national climate and sustainability goal. But then all these things need to be informed from a demand coming from subnational authorities expressing the need of their citizens, the need in terms of human core needs, the need for nutrition and health, the need for shelter, the need for access and mobility, the need for leisure, and the need for clothing. All these needs should be brought into this process of development of longer-term low-emission development strategy. Now, the response to this need, meaning the product and services that need to be developed at the industry level, should also be taken into account. So it means that the sectoral strategy will need to be taken into account with their objective to develop the longer-term low-emission development strategy. So it means that at the beginning, to develop the longer-term low-emission development strategy, we need needs coming from subnational, we need constraints coming from the longer-term goal of the Paris Agreement, and we need sectoral strategies that will actually determine how the services and products that are needed at the local level will be developed. So now, if all these things are in place in the longer-term low-emission development strategy, then it can be translated at the next step into sectoral strategy, into NDCs, and into development strategy at the local level, or this regional and local determined contribution. So you will have from the same document, from the same instrument, the NDC, the regional and local determined contribution, and the sectoral strategy emanating from the same instrument. This will ensure coherence. And also to be sure that we are synergetic and there is no unintended consequence of the implementation of action, we will need to simulate what the implementation of this different action, what the different action on the different leverage point will have as consequence. So finally, what I would like to highlight here is the implementation of this multilateral and integrated collaboration require a new type of leadership, a leadership that can be based on radical collaboration, disruptive leadership with leaders that are able to see the broader picture and also are able to see the interaction across issues, leaders that are voluntarist and visionary, that can paint the future they want for their grandchildren and develop a vision, own it, and drive it into completion. And more importantly, leaders that are able to act now for longer-term benefit. This is only if you have these leaders that hope is possible.
Thank you very much.
We can hope about a brighter future, a future that will allow us to achieve the vision of human dignity, security of the United Nations.
Thank you very much for your overview and for sharing not only your thoughts around long-term strategies, but also your long-term vision on how this could be working and how this is an opportunity to really create a solid platform for cooperation for the future. And speaking of solid platforms of cooperation between national and local, I would like to give the floor now to Ryuzo, who will share a little bit about how the NDCs have been localized in Japan as well. So please share your experience.
Thank you very much. Can I see the slides? Okay. Oh, yes. Thank you very much for having me here today. I'd like to introduce Japanese how to collaborate between national and local government for carbon neutrality. Japanese local government movement is very drastic. Since 2019, only 4 local governments had committed carbon neutrality by 2050. However, as of now, 464 local governments already commit zero carbon emissions by 2050. And these local governments represent 112 million people, so representing the 88% of the Japanese populations. As you know, last year in October, our national government had committed carbon neutrality. But even before the national government's commitment, more than 160 local governments had committed, which represent more than 60% of the Japanese populations. So at first, local government moves faster than the national government. Their motivation can accelerate the national government's carbon neutrality. Next is the national government's turn. Just after the commitment of the carbon neutrality, Cabinet Office set up the Council for Regional Decarbonizations, and this council launched a regional decarbonization roadmap last June. Carbon neutrality by 2050 cannot be achieved by within 2050. Rather, we have to emphasize the importance of the next decade. So this roadmap set the target to create more than 100 model decarbonization regions by 2030s using the existing technologies. And then after that, model cities, decarbonized regions can be replicated as a decarbonization domino effect in Japan. To realize this, we, national government, will mobilize 3 items insensibly: human resource, technical knowledge sharing, and funds. Yes. That's carbon neutrality. Also, the local government cannot focus only the carbon neutrality. Rather, they have to seek the synergy of the other issues to create a multi-benefit. Japan has a lot of the issues facing, like disaster. We have a lot of the disaster, like earthquake or some other issues, and also aging society. So we have to seek the such multi-benefit for realizing the SDGs. For example, some local electricity companies for the renewable energies collaborate with the local government to create a new EV sharing business with using the renewable energies. This also provides a new tool for the complementary for the public transportation. Or some private sectors also provide funding for a local government to set up the renewable energies without initial cost. Such kind of the collaborations can be done in local government or in regions. Our collaboration is not limited in domestically. This case is also the kind of the collaboration between a city and other regions. Yokohama cities also have a collaborations with Tohoku area cities to create renewable energies and also use these renewable energies. our collaboration is not limited in Japan. Rather, our ministries promote city-to-city collaborations with foreign countries. As of now, 41 cities from the 13 countries joined this program with Japanese 17 local government. One of the examples is for the collaboration is Tokyo and also Kuala Lumpur cities. These collaborations, Tokyo Metropolitan Government support the capacity building for creating the green building system and also developing the zero carbon scenario in Kuala Lumpur cities. As a result, Kuala Lumpur cities also announced carbon neutrality last March. So this is a first case of the decarbonization domino overseas. So we would like to collaborate with many local governments in the countries and also the many national governments to set up such multi-level collaboration. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your introduction, and congratulations also for this Council for Decarbonization that you've been setting up with your local governments. I think it's a very exciting way of seeing multi-level governance in action. So thank you for your introduction, but I would like to continue maybe now hear the other perspective, the other side of the coin of this cooperation, and maybe ask Sharon to tell us a little bit about this multi-level governance and how local action planning and multi-level target is being set, for example, in Europe. So Sharon, the floor is yours.
Does it work? I hope so, yes. First of all, good afternoon. Maybe I should introduce myself a little bit more and my city. I'm the mayor of the city of Utrecht. Utrecht is the fourth largest city in the Netherlands, with about approximately 360,000 inhabitants and counting. I think that we are the fastest growing city in the Netherlands, and probably we will hit the box of the 400,000 in some years. I have been also previously a minister for the environment, and it happened to be that I was there in 2015 when Paris was negotiated about, and I was part of the EU negotiation team with Commissaire Cañete at that time. So I have been both active on a national level, but also on a local level. And what I think is really important today is to discuss partnership. Because what I feel is that there is a lack of it. There are many cities who are very ambitious. We have seen it here in Japan, you see it throughout Europe, you see it in South America, in Africa, everywhere actually. And at the same time, the local governors and their teams are not always aligning with the national governments. So when the NDCs should be delivered, the question is this a partnership and a collaboration, or is this made in splendid isolation? And many times you will see that that is the last game, in splendid isolation. And we do know that already at this time, I think about half of all the people worldwide live in cities. And in 2050, that will be approximately even be more than 70%. And I would dare to say that the cities are the keys to change. They are the drivers for change. And all these ambition at local level should be implemented with the national determined contributions. And if that not happens, then we really are not be able to deal with our ambitions set in 2015, as we are already not doing this at the moment. So time is running out. And this partnership is really necessary. And if you look at my city, we are the biker city worldwide #1. So we have built an entire eco-structure around biking, and we try to more or less not get rid of cars. That is, I think, too bold. But what we do try is that we have streets where pedestrians and people on the bike, they are the kings. And actually the people who are in the cars, they are the visitors. And this is how it should be. in modern cities, but it is not easy. So we, for instance, built a parking garage under the ground for almost 12,000 persons where they can park their bike. And it's every day heavily used. We reopened an old canal, which was a four-way motor concrete almost highway through the heart of the city into the old canal, which it was in the medieval times. Our city is almost 900 years old by city rights. It was already there when the Romans were along. It's called Triactum at that time. So we went back to the history in order to be modern. So now we have this big canal. It's called the Singel. It's 5 kilometers round. You can have your run, your morning run, if you want, alongside of it. But it's also a perfect instrument for adaptation. Because when we have heavy rainfall, and we have that a lot of times in the Netherlands, then the water has a new way to run. And so we have a lot of good ideas. We have a lot of things to offer. We have a regional strategy on cleaning energy use, so where we put the windmills, where we have the sun energy, etc., etc. But what we do miss is finance, and there is enough money in this world. I mean, we all know that. The only problem is it's not always there where it has to be, and that we need to organize. So, for instance, I urge my government, I did that today also on the National Broadcast Corporation of the Netherlands by radio, to finally put their money where their mouth is. So if we need this strategy, if they need cities to run and to make it happen, then they should pay. And only in the next 3 years, a highly regarded bureau of scientists has found out that for the Dutch cities, we need 1.5 billion euro to make this happen. And we only got 72 million euro by now. So this is like a devastating gap between what is necessary in reality and what is already on the bank account, so to say. So I would conclude and would say that it is really necessary that if we want to have this change, that we look at the cities. I am a great fan of cities. I think that they are the drivers of change. And I think that we need to collaborate with our national governments, but we also need all your support to put the pressure on them. Because it is not easy. The status quo is always more easy than the change, but we need to do this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your inspiring thoughts, first of all, but also for sharing this dual perspective of having played, say, in both sides of this conversation.
And I was coughing, but I have to say I was negative. But you know, this is like this coughing police, and I'm a bit of rebellion. So when I am not allowed to cough, I have to. I'm so sorry for this. I got my water and I'm fine.
Thank you very much. So, a few thoughts that we heard, of course, not only these amazing examples of action being implemented on the ground with the resources that are available, but also a call to scale up the resources that are out there in order to be able to continue this process and to really implement what is needed. So speaking of funding and resources, I would like now to call upon Julia from the European Investment Bank. Hi, Julia, nice seeing you. And maybe to hear a little bit from you, what is the vision there? How do we make sure that we can scale up the funding to really implement climate action?
Yes, thank you very much. Do you have my presentation?
Yeah.
Yes, thank you very much. So what I would like to talk to you today, and I'm very grateful to be on this panel. It has been extremely interesting to hear the speakers before me. And indeed, I think my presentation will fit into the same logic, meaning that scaling up climate action at the local level is crucial to achieve the global objectives of the Paris Agreement, and in particular to achieve the nationally determined contribution. So you don't need me to tell you how big is the role that cities can play in achieving this nationally determined contribution. So we all know that cities account for a large chunk of global carbon emissions, about 70%. They consume 2/3 of the world's energy, and they are growing, and they're growing fast, meaning that there are estimates that say that by 2050, 2.5 billion people are actually expected to migrate from rural to urban areas, and 90% of this will occur in developing countries, particularly in Africa and Asia. So this growth has an impact on both the increase of carbon emissions from the cities, but also in increasing the vulnerability of the residents to climate change and other shocks, including extreme weather, but also in general. Let's think about the current situation with the global pandemic. So making cities green is essential. Making cities scale up and really take on the objectives of achieving climate action is crucial. However, as we rightly heard right now from the mayor of Utrecht, the investment that is required is very big, and this is a major obstacle for many local governments in everywhere, basically, but in developing countries in particular. There are also estimates that say that by 2030 we would need globally approximately 93 trillion of sustainable infrastructure investment. This is a big number, and of course it requires a plurality of instruments to make sure that we actually achieve it. So on the next slide, what I would like to stress is the fact that there are several challenges that local authorities and cities face in implementing low carbon and climate resilient projects. So of course, there is the ever-present issue of limited access to finance, and this is due to perhaps constraints to the city's borrowing capacity, lack of guarantees at the national level that limit further the borrowing capacity, but also the small size of the investments, which can be an issue for large financial institutions to actually invest and finance the implementation of climate action projects in cities. But there are other obstacles that are also extremely important and ultimately affect the capacity of the cities to deploy efficiently climate action. And this refers to in-house capacity for urban planning, for project preparation, but also for the implementation and monitoring of the actual infrastructure investments. It can also be not necessarily in countries like the Netherlands, for instance, but in other countries where I work in, insufficiently developed regulatory frameworks are a big obstacle for investors that seek certainty in supporting or in deciding whether to invest or not. Then there is the lack of political support at the local level, because you may have an administration in which a few people are committed, but not the whole of the administration, and also at the national level. So, indeed, if in my view, the ability to localize NDCs depends on several factors. First of all, I was mentioning this alignment between local and national political strategic policy objectives, the political support and the commitment. Then the regulatory framework, the capacity of the administration to actually manage these projects, and also when I'm saying about managing this project, I'm also talking about managing the procurement process, recruitment of advisors and consultants that can help develop the project, and also legal advice that may be needed to ensure that the contractual aspects of the project are duly taken into account, and then again monitoring the implementation. And then another final but extremely important point, the involvement and the buy-in from key stakeholders, because if a project has or raises questions or encounters a lot of opposition from the public, the likelihood of these projects being successful is actually very low. So if we go to the next slide, I thought I would mention the fact that there are project preparation facilities that are there. A number of IFIs have, almost all IFIs have their own project preparation facilities. City networks and other organizations also provide these support for project preparation. I just thought I'd mention a couple that the EIB directly offers inside and outside the EU. The City Climate Finance Gap Fund is one. It's focused exclusively on projects outside the EU, and it provides early stage technical assistance for climate projects. In the second example is Elena, which is focused inside the EU and provides assistance for energy efficiency in buildings and transport. Then you have Urbis, which is directed to cities, not specifically to climate, but can provide support in a variety of stages of the project preparation cycle. The Natural Capital Financing Facilities, which focuses for cities, focuses specifically on green and blue infrastructure. And also another example is, of course, the JASPES program, which is a partnership between the EIB and the Commission that focuses on, indeed, project planning, preparation, and the EIB has a strong expertise that can benefit cities in this.
Thank you very much, Julia, for the overview and for also for your analysis and for your thoughts around this still pending, still to be improved, let's say, alignment between different structures, between different policy, between different strategies, and how this can hinder also the confidence of who needs to invest into supporting these processes. So definitely a little bit of work to be done from everyone's side. I think we mentioned this in our panel a few times already. But speaking about work to be done, I would like to give the floor just very briefly to Pier Roberto Remiti now, is joining us online, to tell us a little bit how the GCOM is planning to support the implementation of this process. So another tool on our belt. Piero.
Yes, thank you very much, Georgia. Thank you for at least being part, either in a very short time, to this very inspiring discussion. Let me just use 1 minute, a couple of minutes, maybe not more, to give among the many good news today arising for the Global Covenant on Mayors, starting from the Global Banking Prize and going through the launch of the Playbook, as described first by Benjamin, and also the aggregation report that will be followed up later me. One further good news, one further information that relates to the launch of a specific initiative of the Global Covenant of Mayors in the next year to support the needs that has been so well highlighted and put in evidence by our discussion today and by all the speakers. That means to help multi-level process for implementation of integrated implementation of climate action plan and MDC. In very practical things, thanks to the European Commission new support, actually dates back 1 year, the new support provided by the European Commission to the Global Covenant of Mayors Secretariat that is complementing the support already provided in last years to the regional covenants. The Global Covenants of Mayors will start since early 2022 also to provide specific technical assistance services. One of these will be specifically dedicated to the setup of multi-level dialogues and cooperation platforms, joining, gathering cities, regional and national governments, and financial sector organizations in order to facilitate multi-level implementation in single countries, which is pretty much aligned on what I have heard so far by our previous excellent speakers, starting from the UNFCCC and representative and so many others. So I think we are just aiming and to put in exactly in place what has been discussed so far. This will be developed in strict cooperation with our regional covenant, of course, and it will be developed since the starting phase, through organization of matchmaking events that will gather all the different key actors and stakeholders, so national authorities, regional authorities who are existing, technical bodies that are responsible for reporting, of course, financial institutions, either from the international worldwide arena as well as from the national institutional framework.
Thank you.
So no time for, yes, exactly, for further details, but please, anybody interested in this, please can contact either myself or anybody for the from the regional secretariat to get further information that will be provided soon through our communication channels. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Piero. Indeed, a wonderful announcement of new opportunities to also receive more support within our community. But speaking about wonderful announcement, I think we have one final contribution and one final good news, the launch of wonderful aggregation reports that really showcases the results of our great community. We talked about the challenges, but we should also take a moment, step back and think about our success. So to help us do that, Andy, we would like to hear a little bit from you about this wonderful success of our beautiful community.
Thank you so much, Georgia, and good afternoon, good day, good evening, everybody. And I'll just share in the next couple of minutes, if we can have the presentation up, please. Next slide, please. Just very briefly introduce the findings of our annual aggregation exercise from across the Global Covenant Alliance. So now with more than 11,000 city and local government commitments representing now over 1 billion people, the Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy is the world's largest alliance for city climate leadership. And since 2017, more than 1,700 new cities and local governments, encompassing more than 200 million people, have made a commitment to the GCOM Alliance. These cities and municipalities comprise a diverse socioeconomic fabric, as we've seen and heard on this panel, from small and medium-sized towns to the largest metropolises. And climate action that reflects those local needs and contexts remains the common thread. Next slide, please. And the latest data shows that cities and local governments are not only matching their national governments, but more than 3/4 of Global Covenant of Mayors signatories are going further by setting more ambitious targets, and more than half are acting faster by accelerating the rate at which they aim to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide, please. And based on current targets and actions, GCOM's cities and local governments could collectively reduce global emissions by 1.9 gigatons of CO2 equivalent annually in 2030, compared to a business as usual trajectory. And in 2050, that figure is estimated to be 3.8 gigatons annually, and cumulatively 76.5 gigatons of CO2 equivalent. Next slide, please. But it's not all about the emissions reduction side of things. 609 cities and local governments have reported more than 1,400 high-risk hazards, over 2.5 times the number reported in 2019, suggesting that increased efforts to assess climate risk and vulnerability across GCOM regions. And flooding, extreme heat, and extreme precipitation remain the largest identified risks among GCOM signatories. Collectively, those 3 high-risk hazards alone affect 315 million people. And the latest data show that cities are also starting to implement climate adaptation plans, with more than half reporting at least one action that corresponds to a high-risk hazard. The majority of adaptation actions in reporting cities are focused on water, in buildings, and on health, and with several actions addressing more than one of those sectors. Next slide, please. But as other speakers have noted, then finance remains a big issue. Worldwide funding for COVID-19 recovery measures now exceeds 2.9 trillion euro, with 730 billion euro earmarked for a clean recovery. Since 2020, an estimated 147 billion euro has been committed to climate finance across the buildings and energy sectors alone, highlighting both the capacity and the willingness to finance action at national level. But in its 2021 State of Cities Climate Finance report, the Cities Climate Finance Leadership Alliance reported that only around 7% of the total funding needed to realise the full pipeline of city climate action was delivered. And so we know it's very clear that greater financing and support are needed if countries are going to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement. To finance the 100,000 plus climate actions that we know are in the pipeline of projects that have yet to be implemented just across the buildings and energy sectors alone, GCOM cities and local governments estimate a collective need of 593 billion euros. So the financing gap remains sizable. Next slide, please. There's plenty more detail on all of those numbers. Thank you to all of the cities that have taken time to report, to all of the mayors that have got engaged and committed their cities to the GCOM Alliance. It continues to grow significantly and rapidly, but it really demonstrates that cities and local governments are demonstrating their sizable contributions to the climate fight and are doing that in real time. Bolstering those volumes of financial flows and ensuring an equitable distribution to local governments in low-income countries will really strengthen our collective response to climate change. Leveraging and supporting the efforts of all of those GCOM cities and the huge number of local governments that are now engaged will really show that we can go further and faster and do that together. And I encourage you to take a look at the report and find out some more information. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andy, for the presentation on the common successes, this great success together that we are bringing as a community, but also for underlining again these gaps that still exist and that are still out there. And hopefully this will continue to be the topics of our conversations in the future, this community, these representatives here with us today, but also, of course, more local governments, more national governments, and more partner institutions that can make sure that the GCOM community itself, of course, but also all local governments can really accelerate action as much as possible and support and contribute, of course, the actions that are being done at the national level. So with a very difficult job of giving us some final messages now and to really bring us home after such a very in-depth discussion full of many contributions, I would like now to give the floor to Liviu.
Many thanks. Thanks a lot for having me. My name is Liviu Butz. I'm the Deputy Head of Adaptation at the European Commission. I can only say that it's been really, as you've all heard, a tremendous depth, a very rich discussion. We've heard, I think it's, yeah, you've heard a lot of positive messages of encouragement. This really fits very well with the vision that we have at the EU level for adaptation and for mitigation. We have come to Glasgow with a much increased ambition on both pillars of climate action, and we've heard a lot of positive stories today that are very encouraging. I take note of the aggregator report. For me, it was really an eye-opener. The cumulative figure of signatory reductions by 2050, it's the equivalent of 16 billion cars taken off the roads alone. And really, it is done in cities. It is the cities that ultimately deliver a large chunk of the NDCs, of the nationally determined contributions. It's the cities that build green roofs. It's the cities that build bike lanes, that make biking capitals and really green 70% forested area in Toyota. Really very, very positive messages that I also take home and that I've learned a lot from. And this really fits, as I said, with the EU vision for adaptation and for mitigation. We have at the EU level a new strategy on adaptation from spring of this year, which talks exactly of integrating the governance, taking action both, or not both actually, at all levels. The national level, the regional level, the local level, and as a novelty also at individual level. We have launched the Climate Pact that empowers individual citizens as well to take action on mitigation and on adaptation. And also, it fits in the same vein of working directly with the communities, really reaching across, because the climate crisis is such that we need all hands on deck. That's really something that we cannot afford focusing on only some actors. We need everybody there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Livio, for your final remarks. So I think to wrap it up, let's continue. I think we are in the right direction altogether. Let's keep partnering up. I think this was another key message that came really very strongly out. And let's keep empowering cities to be able to continue delivering on the commitment that they have made altogether. So thank you to my great panelists. Thank you to the audience, of course, both online and here in person. And we look forward to continuing the conversation with you. And you have a little bit of homework now, as you heard. So thank you again, and speak soon, hopefully.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Julia, see you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye-bye.